Hello, this is Lisa Lee, and welcome to this week's enrichment reading. We're going to be looking at how to feel safe, right? How to feel safe in the world, how to feel safe in our bodies, what safety even kind of means given the climate that we find ourselves in. And so, yes, we're working on some community standards. We're sort of dreaming our way towards some of that stuff. But more than anything, there's such a presence of ancestors with us. There's such a presence of guides of different types with us as well. It's enough of a group that I'm very much called to sort of let them kind of speak to us about what it means to feel safe right now. Or even just like what it means to sort of grapple with the level of unsafe that there actually is. And so we can see the candle sort of jumping. I'm going to get some cards out. We are working with Hermes, but again, with all of the guides here, I think this is sort of a group thing. And so with the, yeah, let me get some cards out because there's a couple of things that I want to bring through. We definitely have a guide here that is sort of saying that, there's a lot of work to be done and there's a lot that we're up against in a lot of different ways. But ultimately, the winning strategy in terms of our bodies, in terms of our mental health, in terms of our success overall, has a lot to do with being gentle. And so your guides would like you to sort of think about what it means to sort of attend to things that are like almost demanding of force with kind of a gentle hand. That's not a permissive or a submissive hand, but there's something to a gentle touch that our guides are sort of bringing through here with the ancients. Yes, I can feel their presence. And we can talk a little bit about, I kind of want to, introduce some of these energies as we go along too a little bit. Go ahead and bring some more cards out today on this notion of, and also I do want to ask our guides like how they feel about like what can we do to make ourselves safer. Nurture, yeah. Bottom of the deck we have anxiety, so there is a lot of anxiety here, and I think that there's a guide here that says like that they kind of follow you, like they follow you around all day long going, it's going to be okay, you're going to be okay, it's going to be like, there's almost a guide that's and there's a group of them that's saying it's like we are the committee of sort of trying to kind of help you understand that you're safe, that you're going to be safe. And it's easy to look at the world these days and feel like, like how is it even sane to feel safe when we look around and we see what's going on? And there are things that are going on that every time I look at them, I'm more horrified. And, so like, it's not like we're turning our head away from just how bad it actually is. But our guides again are coming back to say like, we did this, like, cause I keep on seeing, and this is that ancients, right? The ancients are showing me like times of war, times of famine, times of colonizers, like ways in which like they know what it is to be in an era or during a time period or at a moment in time where you have to kind of think about your survival, but also live, where you have to find some way to live. And I'm being shown like an ancestor showing me like a prison and saying that like, and this is of course a weird, not weird, but like, I'm like, wow, really? That's the example you're giving us? But showing that like, even in that space, you still have to choose to live. You still have to sort of experience and choose to engage with others and choose to engage with your creativity and find what it means to live and live your life and have every moment of your life count. And so this is an energy that's saying, it's not the place or the time or the circumstances. It's kind of the art of living with all of that, around all of that, and through all of that. And they're saying, and their ancestors that are stepping forward and they're saying like there are so many of us that have had this experience of life, that this is much more the experience of life than some expectation that life should or like deserves to be another way. And they're not saying that this is the optimal experience. They're saying that this is the experience. In some ways, like this is what it is to have a life. And again, I see our ancestors doing this movement where they like step forward or move forward. It's a kind of a strange movement, but they're almost saying that the instances of the experience of life being in some kind of struggle or some kind of wrestling match with forces of evil that want to kind of take over, or take from you is much more common than not. So that when they say like, we're here for you, when they say that we want to help you, when they say that they want to hold you through this, there's almost this aspect of we've got experience. So let's get ahead. Let's get ahead of this. Let's see where we're going. And so they're saying that, you know, they do want to speak to this anxiety, which is by speaking about what it means to bring peace to your home, peace to your body, peace to your perspective, to interact with the energy of peace as a friend that you can call in, that you can invoke energies of peace that you can invoke. I want to get all of these cards out on the table because the mountain here, there's a lot to learn, but your guides are kind of saying that, you know, one of the things that they want to do with this work, or the work that we're in right now, is start to bring in their stories. And they're showing me like around the bonfire, again, the ancients, the roots, like where you come from, the originals, you know, almost. And I'm seeing this notion of like, you know, sitting around the fire and the art of channeling and bringing through stories and having those stories inspire and having those stories connect to the divine, because these are divine stories and the oracle. And I'm hearing that, like, you know, around the fire in the ancient times, there wasn't some division between something like spiritual channeling and fiction, or spiritual, they're showing me art and spirituality as being the same thing, that if you were singing, that you were channeling the gods, because it was seen that way. And so our guides are basically saying, you know, when it comes to the oral traditions of, they're actually showing me a preacher, and they're saying, you know, even that was co-opted, that was taken. When you see aspects of charisma, you know, charisma is a really interesting thing, because a lot of times when we see charisma or we interact with charisma, it's like, oh, you know, watch out, you know, be careful, like that person has a special character, not defect, but like characteristic, you know, that is this charisma. And we see preachers have it, and, you know, and my guides have talked to me about this many times, because I can find myself like listening to these tarot sermons and tarot sermons and being like, do I have that thing? You know what I mean? Like, should I worry about that? Is that a weird thing? And my guides say over and over again that that's just channeling. The channeling, you know, if you're good at it, if you're able to do it, then you can channel anything. Which is why, like, you see charisma, someone can carry charisma and be like powerfully persuasive. They are channeling something very effectively, but that thing that they're channeling effectively isn't necessarily the best thing. But channeling in the form of oral storytelling, channeling in the form of participating with, you know, the divine muse, or participating with your imagination in any way, like, these are all considered spiritual things. And so our guides are saying, you know, part of what it is going to mean to lean in, to sort of move inward and into closer circles, and even into sort of relationships within your own life, and then also relationships that you have with the divine, that to kind of pull in, to lean in, because there's this aspect of play, and the fact that you're going to you're going to participate in the experience of living, whether or not we have an easy time ahead of us, which we don't, or we don't have an easy time ahead of us. You know, when it comes to all of the horrors that we're going to be looking at in the way of what we're facing, and when it, like, you know, globally, you know, but very nationally, you know, that's the epicenter is here. But what we're kind of facing, our guides are really cautioning us against shutdown, and they're also cautioning us against only experiencing fear and anxiety, only experiencing the uproar and the rage, because they do want you to have balance, and they want you to experience and create through this time, and they want you to do so in a peaceful way. And so with this ancients and this ring being about a relationship that is being forged here, and the relationship that they want you to have with them, with the roots here in the stone being about something that has to be moved out of the way, and the time that we're in being about this something that is needing to be moved out of the way, and this nurture and the eternal child. Again, this speaks to our guides saying, you know, the divine is with you. The deities are with you. And the deities are with you largely and through the ancestors. You know, like there's an intersection there in terms of the deity field being very much about like raw expression and the essence of raw expression. And even the deities being these, like, depending where you enter, you know what I mean? Like these they're gods, and they have a range, you know what I mean? A range of expressions, a range of feelings, and a range of perspectives. And, you know, they are, you know, figures of the past in a lot of ways, even though they exist in the present and the future. But no matter what you're dealing with in terms of like the deity field, there is still a relationship to the ancients that work with you, that lobby for humanity, that act, you know, in concert with what is trying to be achieved here in terms of what's going on. And so you are so nurtured, you are so loved, you are the eternal child. And throughout this experience, you are very much held. And so what we're going to be looking at here is just kind of like how the guides are exactly holding us, what it means to sort of access them, what it means to acknowledge this anxiety, and what it and this mountain here. And the mountain is like this is like an example of like life withheld. You know, enough of a climb ahead of you, enough of an experience ahead of you that has you somewhat protected, somewhat at a distance, somewhat held within. So let's take a look and see what this is all about. Let's take a look and let's see where this wants to bring us, because let's start with the ancients and the ring, which is talking about this commitment they have to you. Because all week long, I've been working with our guides about like this notion of divine love, and you know, and what's the deal with like all of it. You know what I mean? Like, how do we even think about some of this stuff? Because Christianity has really made it hard to, it's like we've all been pretty indoctrinated in one way or another, even if it's not like you were born in the church. Like the patriarchy is there waving its flag in the unconscious space, like to be dealt with. You know, and it's like it has to be overcome, it has to be like walked through in a lot of ways. Yeah, let me just listen in. I want to listen to our guides and hear what they have to say. Yeah, but this notion of love, it's hard because, you know, we see it weaponized, you know, in organized religion. But beyond that, it's also quite real. You know, I've experienced it. We've all had moments of experiencing divine love because we're all here. We're all responsive to this stuff. We all know what it is to be in a relationship with the divine to the extent that we care, you know, that we want to know more, that there is a yearning, that there is some sort of reciprocity, that there's some kind of activity, and that this does have a relational aspect to it. And so when we think about, you know, this impersonal ecosystem of God, and then we think of the deity field as being, they're not really human. So they regard us with a love that just feels different. You know, it hits different. But then the ancestors who really do regard us as their children, and the deities do as well. But it's just like there's such a richness, a relational richness that they want to bring us into in the way of God that isn't about perfection and achieving perfection or relating to perfection or only having perfection around you and just perfection, or only, you know, it's like there is a call for having structure related to what you want to accomplish spiritually, and having structure around what container will hold your faith. But ultimately, like at the heart of this stuff, it are these relationships where there's a commitment and there's love. And so let's get into it. Because last week when we were talking to Hermes at a certain point, there was this notion of like, you know me, take the time to let me in, you know. And that's hard for a lot of people in a lot of different reasons. And, you know, just the Western mind is like marred, you know. Yeah, that's what this Nine of Wands and the Eight of Swords really speaks to, this trap of the mind. And the Nine of Wands speaks to this weary defense that is ongoing. And the Nine of Swords is going to be your nightmare stuff. And with the Seven of Wands, I felt that one coming because I was like, defense. There's like a heavy emphasis on defense here. And so with this Seven of Wands being about defense, this Nine of Wands being about the wounded warrior who is just tired of defending themselves, they're numb. You know, the wounded warrior does have this, I always feel this card, and I do get very like real sensations from the cards themselves. I always feel with this card like a PTSD sort of feeling, or a CPTSD kind of a feeling of hypervigilance, but exhaustion, numbness, and but anger, you know. And so when we think about this Nine of Wands, we think about a lot of trauma around this notion of the commitment, the covenant, that love story around spirituality, you know, the God that loves every single hair on your head and has a lake of tears and has created a kingdom for you, you know, but can't stand understand your outfit and you have to change who you are. You know what I mean? Like, that's like this horrible disconnect that, again, not everybody has it. But when you think about the patriarchy, which is, you know, everyone can become president, all of the opportunities are there for you if you can do it against every odd designed to destroy you. You know what I mean? Like, there's this way of like expectation and our relationship to godlike forces, and the government is a godlike force. You're dealing with this force that has power over your life, whether you like it or not. Your parents are a godlike force. And so when we have this like very intense, and I would even call it like a root trauma related to what it would mean to trust the divine, because that ring really speaks to trust. And we are talking about spiritual practices, and we're talking about the reality of a spiritual reality. And trust is a really, really tough one, but it's all like, I'm hearing like cryptext key, which I think is, I think that's gotta be, like what is that? I'm seeing the cover of the book. It's red. I'm seeing the actress from Amelie. Come on, give me the name of this movie, because I've seen it. I know I've seen it. Spirit. You're not going to tell me, are you? This is going to drive me crazy. I'm seeing the scenes from it. Cryptext key. I think that's from, it's the Vatican, the world card there being about the next chapter. Our guys will just move on. Just move on. But there is this way in which, like, the key to unlocking the power of a lot of the spiritual technologies that work in churches, not because the story that they're telling is true, but because this technology around what it means to place your belief in a container that's going to hold, and the technology in shared belief and the power of shared belief, like, these things are all valuable, and these things are all worth taking back because they were stolen to begin with, reappropriating that which is ours to begin with in terms of ancestral spiritual wisdom. And this is collective, you know, like collective wide, and putting them to use so that they work for us. So something like faith, and something like a covenant, you know, believing that there is a God or a goddess, or a they, because I kind of really feel like God is a they, and I can never get away from that, and in expressing in different ways. But this notion of like God as something that is in a covenant with you. God is some energy that loves you, that cares about you in a world that seems indifferent. There is a utility to that belief along the lines of your own personal safety and your own personal sense of your own invincibility. And your own invincibility is extraordinarily useful. It is an alchemical magic wand that opens almost every door. It's why we see people who get things, you know, who get everything that they want because they're confident. Because they just have the confidence. They're holding that confidence. They project that confidence. People want to interact with that confidence. That confidence is a belief in invincibility that is not true, but functions to do magical things and be a magical alchemy. And so when our guides talk about, you know, the ancients having a commitment, having a covenant with us, you know, this 9 of Wands speaking to, I'm like tired of defending myself. I'm tired of holding myself up. I'm tired of walking through every single crisis, you know, praising the God who will help me, but I'm the only one helping me. Like, there's a lot here with this 8 of Swords position of just kind of not being able to trust, or believe that you're cared about, or believe that you're truly loved. Because holding that belief is an invincibility alchemy. But it's also not true in the way that we were taught it. It's true in a different way. And I think we're going to look into what that might mean. But with this 9 of Swords being about the nightmare of everyday experience, the nightmare of everyday life, the reality that we have to sort of wake up with. You know, so many times when I'm talking to my guides, I will like look at them in the middle of like a hilarious conversation, and I'll just say, like, am I avoiding my life? Just, you know, having this spiritual experience, you know, getting this spiritual wisdom, taking it in, synthesizing it with you, like making some kind of sense of what it means to walk a spiritual walk, be a mystic in the world. Like, am I just avoiding some like reality along the lines of like what it means to hallucinate? You know what I mean? Like, and we all have to grapple with that, because I don't believe that what I'm doing is hallucinating. I really don't at this point in my life. I don't see it that way in any way, shape, or form. But how many of us have these, what you would call like moments of clarity in our spiritual walk, where the spiritual walk is working, the spiritual experience is doing what it's supposed to do. It's setting us free. It's putting us on new paths. It's helping us creatively solve problems. It's giving us inspiration. It's putting us in orbit with those who are meant to be around. It's doing the thing. It's changing us. It's making it all happen. But then we kind of turn around at one point and we say like, well, wait, am I just trying to avoid the fact that I should be working a 9 to 5 in a capitalist hellhole that gives me some sorts of security? You know what I mean? Like the number of times that, you know, we have to kind of stop ourselves when we're living an authentic life, when we're in the midst of living an authentic life, the number of moments that we have to stop ourselves and say, should I change to be safer? Should I have made safer decisions so that I could have a safer experience? Should I be having a different experience of my natural expression, my natural way of seeing things, my natural way of doing things, because it's not reality based, right? So like there's this relationship we have with ourselves that can be a little bit shame based along the lines of what it means to have an authentic relationship with the divine, authentic relationship with ourselves, what it means to spend our time on the kinds of things that make us feel more alive, to be real, you know what I mean? And so one of the first things that we can do to begin to feel safer around this notion of a covenant with the ancients who support us, with the spiritual support that exists for us, is to first understand that we have no control. We were never going to have any control. There is no control. And that if we were to change ourselves and contort ourselves into a different life for the semblance of more control, that therein lies the deception to a certain degree. And so part of the safety that we can begin to have around this notion of like we are supported by the divine, the spiritual reality that we live in is not some sort of escapist route, because it's a spiritual reality, and it's not an escapist route from the hard day-to-day misery. Because without it, what ends up being the day-to-day misery is annihilating, right? It's not the opiate of the masses to believe something. It can seem like it, you know, but in the absence of that belief, that absence is felt. The absence of God, the absence of God is the absence of a spiritual belief, the absence of a spiritual truth is felt so profoundly in the stark reality of what it means to try and ignore the spiritual influence. It's understood, you know, and so like one of the things we can do to feel a little bit safer about our spiritual walk and the spiritual help that is all around us is to begin to find an acceptance, not only of like the reality that we experience as helpful, but the place that we go in a spiritual sense to be away from the hardships and the misery is also where we get our nourishment, also where we get our inspiration, also where we get the power for transformation, also where we get the alchemy of something like confidence that we wouldn't normally have, because we're operating from that place of being loved, believing we are loved, knowing we are loved, even if that alchemy is confusing with the way that things look. Because it's really easy to look at the hate in the world right now, to look at the barrel of the gun that we are staring down right now and feel like we are abandoned by the divine forces that are all around us. When the opposite is true, they're stepping toward us. They're stepping closer and they're saying, this is the experience of life that we had. This is much more common than any experience of life where it's fair. And so what does that mean to us? And what does that mean to have this ally, to have this communal experience, to have this covenant with those who came before us, with these ancients here? And so let's get some cards on this roots and this stone. Because the defense, you know, you are defended, but what it looks like for you to be defended might not like feel that way. You know, a lot of this anxiety comes from, my guides are like, you know, they kind of just pointed me to this moment. Whenever I lose my keys, I curse the gods every single time. Like every single time I lose my keys, or my navigator in the car isn't working right, or I forget something, like I had an appointment and I don't remember it, every single time I curse them. because I basically sort of just feel like, you know, if you can't protect me from my own idiocy, then like, what good are you? You know what I mean? Like, how are you real if you can't tell me where my keys are? If you can tell me like, you know, some impossible to know thing about someone's grandmother, but you can't tell me where my keys are, what's the point of belief, right? And I ultimately find my keys, but the point is, you know, what we get in the way of protection and defense with that Seven of Wands, it might not be immediately understandable to us. And I want to get a little bit more on that, because I feel like a lot of the destruction comes from an expectation that life should be another way. Even like, is God real? Is God not real? Is there a God? Is there not a God? Is there a God that's coherent, or is there a God that's incoherent? All this stuff operates around this notion of like reward and punishment. And reward and punishment, you know, it operates on an axis of like, God is good if things are good. God is bad if things are bad. God loves me if things are easy. God doesn't love me if things are super difficult. And anything that, you know, bypasses like the harsh treatment of this world by way of saying it's God's will is a problem as well. And so, you know, I do really want us to think about this notion of like, it's important with this covenant and the ancients that what it means to participate in the love of the divine isn't necessarily about something high atop the thing with all of the benevolent power to bless or curse. It's not about a perfect system of reading symbols that allows you to make the right answer every single time. Like, there are times when your guides are trying to get through to you and they just can't. There are times when my guides are trying to get through to me and they can't, because I'm cursing them because I can't find my keys. You know what I mean? So it's like there's this way in which they want us to regard spirituality a little bit different than the way we kind of tend to. And especially when it comes to like working with energies, like, you know, this notion of like, if the energy in the room feels evil, it's against you and it's going to get you and it's going to take you down. No, there's something to do with that. There's something to learn from that. There's something to experience. There's something to understand. And it doesn't mean that you signed a contract that says you're here to be terrified, but it does mean that there's something about your unconscious experience or the unconscious experience of something that you inherited that is before you, for you to gain some level of power over, and then empowerment through, and then break the curse. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of stories that we're meant to adapt to, you know, that we came in as a part of the covenant with the ancients. So it's not just that the ancients and the ancestors have a covenant with you to make it easier. You have a covenant with them to unlock certain things, to bring to light certain things, to heal certain things, to liberate certain ways. And like this is a covenant much more of working things out than it is of ease. And it's almost like there is this notion of like the sins of our fathers being visited upon us, you know, that we have to sort of work out the sins of patriarchy, because right now they're ugly and they're rearing their miserable head, and they're threatening to destroy the world with bombs. We have to deal with that sin, even if it's not ours. And like the concept of sin is something we're going to have to look at, because it's not so much in terms of like legislating morality, but like fostering it. Well, Hermes has been talking to me a lot about a safe space within fosters a safe space without. And that having some, not a doctrine, but having an agreement where those things work together as like, this is the experience within, this is the experience without. I don't have it like perfectly yet because it's hard, but it's not rules. It's kind of like, it is almost alchemy based. And so our guides are basically saying, you know, they want us to lean into the nurture right now. They want us to lean into not feeling like we have to be the strongest, best, most accomplished, but leaning into this notion and this experience of ourselves as this eternal child that the ancients want to nurture through the process of becoming and overcoming that which we are in covenant. And it is a love covenant to work through in this life, because there is something in the way of a stone trapped at our roots, with the Sun card there being about clarity. And the Emperor there being about my nemesis. No, I'm just kidding. this Page of Swords being about the messenger. You know, so the defense that exists for us is there, but it like there's a guy that's saying it behooves. I like the word, the behooves. It behooves you in this place of anxiety to understand that you're a part of a much bigger picture, to take that infinite worldview. Because again, we're talking about the alchemy of an invincibility that translates as an unsinkable confidence, that translates as one of the best weapons for managing a situation like we're about to manage or have to manage. Because there's something about what we're going into in the way of fascism that it has a snake-like quality. It's something that it operates with the same game plan and the same desire for the same sort of outcome of enslaving and creating tiers of well, it's disgusting. It really is horrible. But it's wearing a different mask. It's not necessarily going to be identifiable in whole along ideological lines, although in large part it is. There is some element here of the mask that like it's willing to, there's such a sneaky way. And I guess that's like something to look at. I'm kind of flinching back because it's really hard to actually look at some of that stuff. But ultimately what we're kind of seeing here is, I lost the channel because I got disgusted. Hold on, let me just have a little bit of water and find my way back. Sometimes it's hard to look. The defense that there is for us has a lot to do with what's being planted within us. It has a lot to do with what it means to channel and what they're able to do if we allow them to be channeled through us. That responsibility aspect of the covenant is really interesting here. And with the eternal child being about a way of orienting where your belief that does function, you know, if it's holding, it'll function. I think we have to talk a little bit about this belief. We're talking about a belief-based belief system, whether we realize it or not. You know, we were talking about the placebo effect as being like a really big cornerstone of what it means to adopt a spirituality that says spiritual technology works. Like, you know, it just does. You know, first of all, there needs to be some experience with spiritual technology. If you have had spiritual technology work with you in the past, even through like an indoctrinated dogma, you know how it works, what it means for it to work, and you're wary of it because you know that if it works, it'll work with any story, and then any story can be weaponized to hurt people in a very like spiritually intimate way. That's being against everything that worked there. And it's true. It's true that it can be used to hurt people. And acknowledging that and looking at that and saying that very honestly is how you work with it so that it doesn't. Is calling it technology, is not saying that it's story specific, is acknowledging that the pitfall of putting the belief in the story is that we become tyrants. But it is a belief-based spirituality in the sense that we put the belief in the technology itself, absent the story. And we say that if you believe hard enough, if you believe sincerely enough, that you will be healed. And that's a dangerous thing, right? That can be a really problematic thing, because then we have merit-based spirituality, reward and punishment spirituality. So, you know, we're going to throw it all out and we're going to pick through it to try and find, you know, what aspects of spiritual technology work, how they work, and what it means to believe into those things without bringing shame, without bringing punishment, and without bringing that merit-based spirituality. But we know, so that's kind of like, you know, we think about our roots and we think about what has been developed with the ancestors and the ancients is ways of understanding when it does and it doesn't work, why it does and it doesn't work, what aspects of faith are to be permissive, you know, what aspects of faith are to be, you know, where you take hold of it and move with it. These things work themselves out in relationship and story. And that's why the belief isn't so much based on the right or wrong way of regarding the technology, but in the relationship that fosters it. And in the relationship that fosters these beliefs are going to be with energies, entities, ancestors, deities. And how we regard that belief, again, like these things are tricky because it's going to be different for everybody with that Justice card and that Two of Wands and that Eight of Coins and the Knight of Swords being about what does it mean to take action on this sort of a thing? That stone with that roots there, it's like there's a root, there's a stone that the roots have grown around, and that stone that the roots have grown around doesn't offer nutrients. And that stone that the roots have grown around that doesn't offer nutrients is going to be patriarchal dogma and dogma, like the patriarchal dogma, but like just generally religious and not religious dogma. It's whatever is not nourishing, whatever is not fostering connection and community, whatever is not giving you a sense of yourself as being loved, whatever is not giving you any sense of that companionship, that spiritual companionship. Anything that is blocking you from those things, all the fear-based things that keep you from any access to what it means to be loved by the divine or loved by your ancestors, what it means for you to be supported by the ecosystem of spirituality. If there's all kinds of fear booby traps around that, that's keeping you from that feeling of safety in those relationships that are loving, that have gotten you this far, that is what has gotten you up every time you've fallen down. And that is the driving force behind all of the strength that you've been able to walk with. These ancestors are so there for you, it's not even funny. But whatever is the booby traps around what it means to be in their presence, to accept that companionship, to accept that love, to view ourselves as being adored. Those are all mechanisms of separation that speak to this notion of the stone that is where the roots are. And so we're meant to dislodge from that stone. And what is not giving life, what is not giving good feelings and support and love in the way of a spiritual energy that you're spending time with, has to be moved out of the way. And this is a covenant with the ring here, with the ancients. That is a lot of work with the Eight of Coins, with the Justice and the plan. Two of Wands is always about the plan. Justice is about, there's some presence of injustice. The covenant here is related to solving some problem of injustice. And the plan here, with lots of work, has something to do with you. And you are loved and nurtured for being here and doing this. You are loved and nurtured for participating in this. You are loved and nurtured for taking this tour with all of the features and all of the traits that make up all of the ancestors that need you, that you are in covenant with, that you loved. And they were like, let's do this. Let's overcome these things. Let's support each other. Let's be you. Let's, all of us, be you. And with you and for you. And everything about you is valued and loved and cherished. So to step into that with your heart, to accept that into your heart. Yes, there's a religious sort of sound and ring to it, but it makes sense. And it's a story that says everything that you are traveling with in the way of what makes you you is supported and loved and valued by the universe that you are and the universe that you're in. It's a choice to believe you are loved. It's a choice to step into a different kind of story that nurtures you, that allows you to be nurtured from that place. And the fear booby traps around your safety and the safety of your body and the safety inside your body. There's a lot to that. But just accepting that you are loved and lovable, accepting that you are defended, and understanding sometimes it's not going to look like that in the way that you want it to. And that's the work that we're doing in terms of what it means to dislodge this stone, because a lot of what that stone is a story that did not provide. It was an expectation that was not met. And so when we look at this clarity here with the Sun card, and we look at the Emperor here taking control over, and we look at the Seven of Coins here, the toil for God and Goddess's favor. If I give you this offering, will you heal my child? If I bring you this bread and I put it on the altar, will the crops grow? Or, if I deny who I am will you let me into heaven? I mean, these are all concepts of the divine that are begging and pleading for their mercy, so that there can be some sort of control over our lives that discerns whether or not we're going to be okay or not okay, whether or not we're safe or we're not safe. What can I do to ensure this safety? And the divine is saying, this is actually not the process here with the Sun card, the Emperor, and the Seven of Coins. With the Nine of Wands. The Nine of Wands is the soldier who is putting a piece of cake on the altar every morning and saying, let the fight end, let me rest, let me stop having to battle. Let me be successful. Let me win already. And the Eight of Swords is trapped in a place where this is a God that doesn't answer. And the Nine of Swords is a terror that is so deep that there is no help. And all of this is why it's hard to do this work. But ultimately, when we think about this covenant with the ancients, and when we think about what this stone that needs to be removed from the roots, and this eternal child, your infinite self, and the nurture that exists for you, let's get some cards that can be helpful. It can lift us up a little bit from this place. These ones. All right. Because that's what our guides are here for right now. They're when I was kind of talking to them all week, they were like, I want you to think about moving a mountain, right? Doing that, actually moving a mountain, but doing it from a place that is gentle, 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 the tender touch. And I was like, that seems insane. Like, what do you mean? None of that makes any sense. But there is this way in which our guides are like, one of the biggest battles, one of the hardest things to overcome, one of the hugest obstacles, the stone that is, blocking from life, everlasting or whatever. The biggest thing our guides are showing is just you being able to accept that you are loved, that you are protected, that you are cared for. And we're going to get some cards on that because how is that true? If you're cold, if somebody is scheming on your life, if you look out and it doesn't seem like there's anything that's going to support you, with this, this is the best, this benevolent guide card is that, I love that card. It's like one of my favorites. Means that there's this card, the actual technical meaning of this card is that you are with a guide who is so benevolent that nothing you can do, you cannot go wrong. If we were to find the book, and it's somewhere, I'd have to take it out, but the book on this, I think if I were to read it, I think it says, like, you're with a guide that is so powerful that you cannot do wrong. You are with a guide who is so benevolent that you're like a child with a parent who can walk everywhere you are walking and spoil you, and you have not a fear in the world. Like, that's kind of the essence of this card. But with coagulation, which is about, like, for me, I see like a wound, like the scab over a wound coagulating into like a scab that first has to sort of hold it together while it heals, and it's a tough exterior, and then underneath there can be this healing process. There's a lot of debris in this wound of abandonment that people carry around in the way of a relationship to the divine because of the destroyer that is that expectation. That expectation that says, if you do this, you're going to get that. If you're this kind of person, you'll have that kind of outcome. I love you, but that you have to do this. All of that is this stuff that's in this wound that needs to coagulate, that needs to heal. And so it's like you can't do wrong in terms of this eternal child and the nurture. And if you look at this card here, you can see just like the way in which this fox is holding the baby fox. This acceptance that you are with a benevolent guide, that you are not abandoned. That you are not abandoned. Because how do you combat that anxiety, that existential dread that you are abandoned? Like the gods, the ancients are saying that you're not abandoned. And some of that non-abandonment with this coagulation card on the bottom of the deck. And I want to get a couple cards on that. Some of what it means to not be abandoned is to acknowledge the presence of your guides, to acknowledge what it feels like when they're just being playful with you, to acknowledge what it feels like when they upset you, because sometimes that happens, to acknowledge what it feels like when they are so loving, and they lift you up when you find that place of comfort, when you find that place of like, really beautiful stuff can happen in acknowledging that these connections exist, and not having them be at a cognitive dissonance, like quartered off distance place where you've had these incredible experiences and you can't believe that they happened, but they're like in the dream space. You can't remember exactly. You remember the dream and the things that happened, but you can't really remember being there. You remember the spiritual things that they happened, but like, what does it mean to actually acknowledge that? You know, in the same way that like your spiritual life can be so vibrant, and then you'll have these moments of clarity where you think about what it would mean to be absent that, and that's a reality that's far more horrifying, but somehow that gets to be real and your experience doesn't. You know, like there's this way in which we have to recalibrate what the spiritual experience even is to begin with. And that recalibration has to do with like pulling out the debris of our wounds. And that means the fear, every fear that jumps up when you feel another presence and you're like, wait a minute, should I, you know, is it right or wrong? You know what I mean? Like purity, not purity, you know, like there's all kinds of stuff that happens that really keeps us from that access of that place with the ancients, where that covenant around the work that needs to be done, the healing that needs to be done, the work that needs to be done, the plan that needs to be attended to. There are these parenting sort of agreements with the cosmos that we're in, whether we understand what they mean or not. I mean, I see it all the time with Akashic records, and I actually don't know what it means. You know, I'm always sort of trying to figure it out. But with this benevolent guide being like, you can't go wrong. This gestures here and the repeat. Let's see what else. Forgotten self. So the inner cricket, the inner cricket. This is the inner critic. Let me just have a sip of water. The inner critic. I'm going to start calling the inner critic the inner cricket. Because my inner cricket is crazy. Here we go. With the like my inner critic. Yeah, inner cricket really kind of like demotes the inner critic. That's a good thing. I like it. Okay, so I'm going to read these little blurbs here. What does your inner critic most often say to you? What evidence can you find to combat your inner critic? So this is going to be about where we make decisions, about what we spend time with, what we adopt, and what we bring into our self-concept. And so, you know, when it comes to looking at religious technology, like what makes it work, what makes it not work, what makes it hazardous, what makes it helpful, you know, some of this is just recalibrating around this notion of like magic. We understand without a question that magic is really good and can do really good things. Magic is real and really powerful, but magic can also be really scary and do some stuff that like really kind of puts you in a position where you have to like, you know, figure out a way around it. You get tested, you know. When we think about it in terms of magic, you know, it's easier to say, yeah, that's just the way that it is. It's the way that it is. When we think about it in terms of our relationship to God or relationship to Goddess, suddenly it's like these rules are unrealistic. Like, you know, spirituality and using spiritual technology, like sometimes it can be bad and sometimes it can be good. And so we have to kind of bring that sometimes it can be bad and sometimes it can be good to understanding what it means to craft and participate in a spiritual practice, because we have to give that allowance. We have to have that space for an allowance. And if you had some bad experiences where you were tested by some deity, or you had an experience where you thought you were hanging out with like a friend that died, but it's like, is that a trickster? Like, what's going on? Like, you know, what's happening here? You know, and then you start to sort of bring these walls of the inner critic, the inner cricket. That inner cricket starts to show up and make noise. Like, this is such a cool image too, because that inner cricket is like a cricket. It's like a cricket in the house that is just making that noise, and it's somewhere and it's making a noise and it's giving you a hard time and you're orienting around it. And so Spirit is basically saying, you know, one of the things we're doing about moving this rock from the roots is putting the cricket in place, not letting that inner critic actually drive the car, not letting that inner critic make decisions for you, and not letting that inner critic tell you what you deserve, what's going to happen to you, where, you know, what is of value, and like, are you doing what's of value? Are you using your time the best possible way? I mean, there's actually asking yourself these questions, you know, to try to get to a better place with certain patterns or habits. But ultimately, like, you know, we have to think about the inner critic and the stone as being the same false god. And we have to think about false gods as being many instead of just one. Just like we think about a god as being many instead of just one. There are many false things that we're meant to identify, and then from that identification, by contrast, be able to find the true, find the real. Sorting. So much of what we do in terms of our spiritual journey and learning is about sorting. And so when we're able to sort of use that, look at that inner critic saying, you know, you got it right, you got it wrong, it was good, it was bad, and say, I was sorting, I was discovering, and I was sorting. And you let yourself off the hook, and suddenly you're not good or bad, and like your ultimate like truth and your ability to conceive of, and is your intuition true or is it false? Like, let yourself off the hook, and suddenly it's just you're sorting. You're just sorting. Gentle, gentle. The gentle. We're doing gentle moving of mountains, learning discernment, becoming an expert at alchemy. That's from sorting. So you were sorting. So when we think about, like, does the divine love me? Does the divine not love me? Is the divine able to help me? Is the divine not able to help me? Am I doing it wrong? Am I doing it right? Is my belief right? Is my belief wrong? Because so much of what we're facing in society is going to filter its way into a tyranny that affects everyone's unconscious mind. And so when you have this energy sort of, you know, being the judge and jury over your quality of life and whether you're making the grade or you're not making the grade and how you're supposed to feel about that, gentle. You have a covenant with the ancients to heal certain things within the bloodline of humanity itself, to remove this stone from the roots of humanity. This is a big deal. But you are nurtured. You're with a benevolent guide. You can't do wrong. You are the eternal child. You are infinite. Part of what it is to have a spiritual belief system and a spiritual practice, if you choose this way of doing it, is to step into that infinite sense of yourself. To be with infinite energies is to step into an infinite sense of yourself, to participate and get along with and hang out with those infinite energies, is to know that infinite part of yourself. To be that infinite part of yourself is to let go of the tyranny of needing to win and survive and achieve and all of it. To let go. And that inner critic, let it become a cricket that reminds you that you have this benevolent guide with you that says, whispering into your ear, you are infinite. You cannot fail. You cannot be killed infinitely. That is not possible. What this finite experience is and what these finite threats are. That's the substance of sorting. That's the substance of learning. That's the substance of experiencing. And that's the substance of doing all of those things with the ancients, with the divine, never alone. That you can test and feel every time you lean in to pray. And so when we begin to ask these questions of, okay, so what are we doing? Well, it's a challenge. What is that challenge? We are in a covenant with the ancients to work on righting this injustice, and this plan that we are a part of is about taking dominion over the spirit of slavery that is sucking the life out of humanity and a rock at our roots. And the way that we can begin to disassemble this monstrous beast is through our own unconscious participation with it. Because we are connected to the collective unconscious. We are connected to the collective unconscious. When we are connected to the collective unconscious, we know that we have magical influence over the collective conscious. And so when it comes to disempowering those energies and stepping away from those energies and stepping into an energy that says, I am held, I am saved, I am provided for, I am protected. It may not look like I think it should look like based on my quality of life, rewards, and punishment template that I've been given, that consequently sets us up for failure. But by another rubric, and that other rubric is what is with me right now, supporting me right now. Where is this companionship? Oh, I feel it. there's nourishment. I'm going to connect to that. I'm going to move away from this critic, this internal voice that says you have to barter for it. And so this gestures here, what symbolic gestures can you use to acknowledge your shadow self? Again, like this notion of disempowering the tyranny of wrong and right and work for it and achievement and punishment and reward and all of that hierarchical indoctrination, even as it pertains to our sense of God, is to step into the sense of God that is more the ancients and the covenant of love that I am with them on in righting this wrong, bringing justice and the work that needs to be done, that I cannot go wrong. I am with this benevolent guide. I am the eternal child. I am eternal. And I can be nurtured in any moment that I need that nurturance. Any minute that you are in, whether it's a minute where you are standing facing a firing squad, or it's a minute where you were overwhelmed at the supermarket, or it's a minute when you are cold in your car. All of those minutes, you can call the divine into those moments, and believe me, and you probably have had these experiences yourself, you will feel that presence. And maybe that is what it is, to bring that infinite, eternal aspect into that finite moment of grief and set yourself free. And should it be that way, you're part of this covenant of bringing this justice through this plan, this agreement, this work. And again, it can be so easy to say, well, that can't be God because I want some God that loves me and makes it easy on me. And that might not be the nature of the evolution that we find ourselves participating in. And that evolution has a lot to do with tension and then growth and adaptation. And so when we think about these gestures, like how can we look at our shadow self? How can we look at this inner critic, this inner cricket? How can we make the inner critic, I want to make a t-shirt, or not really, but this is funny. How can we make the inner critic just a cricket? It's telling us of something we might want to be aware of, that we might want to take action on, that we might want to dismiss. But then it goes away and doesn't take up all of that space. Because in allowing ourselves to feel loved, to feel held, to feel like we're participating in something really powerful and really beautiful, and to make that cricket just a cricket, is to first acknowledge the shadow that says the reality is the experience where there's no spiritual truth, where you get that you get what you work for, where you got to get for you and take care of you and survival of the fittest, and like work all day, don't sleep, like that's the winning strategy, 9 points of being the best body you could be, don't age, you know what I mean? Like if you're looking at all of these instructions that the world is giving you about what is reality, what's a realistic approach to life, and you're having to put yourself into contortions of levels of compliance to maximize your success and your stability. If you're like, look at that, and you're like, or the version of me that is talking to my ancestors and gardening and crying out for some form of transformation, only to have that followed by a visitation that literally makes the window, shimmer with rainbows. And it's one of those experiences that's like a dream, and it's spiritual, and you know that it happened, and it's magical, and it's real, and you want to hold on to it, and it actually like moves you from within. And then you cry for an hour and you have a catharsis. And then you write something or you draw something, and then you lay there looking at the ceiling, talking to your ancestors, and you can really hear them and really feel them. And it's amazing and it's beautiful. Which is the real thing, right? What's real? Doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Because both versions of that there's the day where you're out there and you're complying and you're making it happen and you're going to do what it takes and you're going to pick up those bootstraps, because that's facing reality. Or there's the other day where you're communing with the divine and there's colors in the room that like weren't there before, and you know it. All that stuff. You have the same degree, the absolute 100% same degree, lack of control, lack of certainty. And so the experience that you're going in for when it comes to creating the infinite version of yourself that you're meant to be is much more valuable. Spending time in infinitely valuable activities like connecting with the divine forces that are with you to guide you and cherish you and provide for you and nurture you through this process. Not just you, but the ancestors that are with you, that are expressing through the traits that you have, through the features that you hold, and through the stories that you have epigenetically inherited from them, including this anxiety about survival. And they're all rooting for you because your liberation is their liberation. Because that's how the ecosystem of the divine works. And so it's like there's this notion of like what it means to have a safe space within. Some of these religious technologies, like allowing yourself to really feel like you're a part of something bigger, allowing yourself to really feel like you are loved and you are supported and you are understood, and it is a team effort. And when it doesn't feel like it's going great, it's not because you did something wrong or there is no God. It's because you're meant to be experiencing in communication with every support system that is available to you, a problem-solving technology of faith or otherwise that is part of this justice-bringing plan that requires work. And there are those of us crying out and being like, there's no energy for work. And then your guides are saying, gentle, gentle, the gentle touch. And really what they're saying about that work is that some of that work is releasing yourself from a reality that would have you achieving in favor of reality that would have you receiving. And to step into that reality of receiving, that is the work that they speak of. Because the forgotten self in reverse and repeat in reverse, this does speak to that like repetitive insanity around certainty and getting it right and wrong and right and doing the work and making it happen and putting yourself on the line and the sacrifice that it takes. Because sometimes there's a time and place for that. But all of those things that I just listed require the hand and the presence of the divine to be effective and to have minimal damage. It does require a relationship with the divine to move certain mountains. Because you're going to be channeling something no matter what. And so what you're channeling, the drive that you're channeling, it's either fear-based, and that's going to extort your energy and siphon it right out of you. Or it's divine inspiration, which feels a lot more like a relational aspect. And so this repeat and this forgotten self, the forgotten self, what aspects of your personality have you forgotten? And repeat, I am worthy and deserving of love and acceptance just as I am. These are two things that what keeps you driven? Why are you running? Why are you driven? How come you have to be the best? How come you have to make sure that they understand you and that they're not misunderstanding you? How come you have to have these achievements to prove to them? And how come you need these achievements to have the safety that you need because under the circumstances? And how come, everything about this drive to achieve has some roots in feeling like the world that you're in doesn't think you're worthy of survival, just being you. And that's a reality, and that's a reality that you have to face as the structure that you're in. But it's not the reality of who you are. It's not the truth of who you really are. And so, with this forgotten self, what aspect of personality have you forgotten in the pursuit of your worth to prove to the world that there's worth? To prove to the world that they were wrong when they said that the choices that you were going to make were going to lead you to a place that you weren't going to have anything. I mean, these are real fears. Or the kind of person that you want to be isn't acceptable and therefore there will be punishment. Then you have to prove otherwise. It's like there's the driving force of doing what you need to do to survive. And then there's the driving force of doing what you need, not just to survive, but to prove to those that's told you that if without this quality of life, you're nothing. Without that kind of achievement, you failed. To walk away from that kind of sort of relationship with even the world around you and to look around you and say, do I have a warm blanket? Am I hungry? What is this defense and the provision that is currently here? What does it mean to have the provision that I have? What does it mean to accept the provision that I have? What is it to look at it like it's enough? Because it may be that the provision that you have seems woefully inadequate given the world that we are currently in. But this covenant with the ancients to move through this work on this path of righting this injustice, moving out this stone, finding nourishment in places that nourishment isn't when the stone is there, removing yourself from that stone. A lot of this work is really mysterious. And again, like there are places that we find ourselves that, like, where we're cursing the gods from a sleeping bag, you know what I mean? That's warm and toasty, you know, with enough food for now and enough for later, and some semblance of a plan forward, and the whisper of inspiration that gives us the hope for the next step that gets us to that next spot. And before we know it, we're on a slightly more comfortable place with slightly more heat and less need for a sleeping bag and more in the way of a blanket. And from that blanket and from that moment, and building from there and building from there and getting there and being helped and being inspired, and the journey and the adventure and whatever this process is, falling asleep, feeling held and loved, and believing in that love and believing in what it means to be held, to know that wherever you find yourself, whatever it looks like, that forgotten self, I am worthy and deserving of love and acceptance, needs to be what you hear, believe, and understand more than anything else. Even if you find yourself having to prove yourself for money. That very true, I am worthy and deserving of love and acceptance, should be unshakable, no matter what the hell you're doing. And that's what it means to step into this. I am loved. I am cared for. And it is a stretch. You know, it's actually not easy. It's really, really hard. But when you come from this place, and this is belief-based, again, it's belief-based. I am worthy and deserving of love and acceptance just as I am. That is a belief. That is a belief that you either ascribe to or you do not. And when we ascribe to that belief, it has the power to move mountains from within. When we can take that one step further and say, I am helped by the divine, I am held by the divine, I am nurtured by the divine knows me and loves me and is conscious of me. That's a spiritual technology in relationship to spiritual forces, that you participate in prayer, that you participate in ritual, that you participate with enough to have a sense of that magic, a sense of that presence, a sense of what those experiences mean. And to believe then, in the same way that you believe you're worthy and deserving of love and acceptance, to actually be able to go one step further. It's very easy to say I'm worthy and deserving of love and acceptance just as I am. We can all invest in that belief. But one step further says I am loved by those spiritual principalities that are invested in my success, that are invested in my growth, that are invested in nurturing me, that are invested in helping me, that have gotten me this far, that are holding me now, that are holding me up, and they love me, and I know it, and I can walk with that knowing, and I can walk with that confidence because it is true, because I believe it as much as I believe that I am worthy and deserving of love and acceptance. Right there. Those are alchemical truths that are belief-based, that you place your belief in, and that by truth, I mean truth to you, because you decide, yes, this makes sense. That has the power to change the way you experience your life, to change the way you experience your hardships, and to change the way that you see what you perceive to be the dangers that exist in life. Because there's the dangers that exist in your life, and there's the dangers that exist in life writ large. And that's a harsh reality. And then there's a notion of those dangers without the presence of all of the principalities of good that love you and care for you and that are invested in your success. And so you can put that belief in an absence of those energies that you feel, or you can put that belief in the presence of those energies. And so part of what it means to foster that safe space within is to begin to participate with that technology of faith around belief, and that what you participate and what you place your belief in does have a tangible effect on what is available for you in the way of peace. And so we don't really get a rule, we're not really getting these rules, because I keep on getting, I do get a lot of notes that I think are going to be helpful in terms of what a community standards kind of a, agreement looks like. We're going to get there. Like, I'm working on it. But, what we are hearing so profoundly from our guides is this notion of, we really want to think about this shared belief system as being of value. And it doesn't have to be riddled with the kind of pitfalls that we have come from. It can take all of those very tangible truths about what the different alchemy of what the spiritual technologies do, and then apply them very powerfully on shared beliefs that aren't about buying into a story, that aren't story basis beliefs, but beliefs that we just can understand. I am worthy and deserving of love and acceptance just as I am. That can be a pillar of belief. And to the extent that that is extended to a belief in the divine, that's experiential. That's something that we participate in relationship with until we find that to be true. And that can take a lot of time. But when we're able to find it to be true, when we're really able to accept that truth, that reality of that truth, the power that it has, and we've seen the spiritual technology of believing that God is on your side and what that has the power to do, that power becomes your power. That technology becomes functional. And the belief-based things that are effective, we got to work on this for a long time. It's not an easy thing. We're not, we are figuring it out. We're playing with this stuff. I think it's important to do so. I think the spiritual practice is about actively playing with this stuff, not just talking about it. Falling in love, soul cage, and drift. With this vulnerability, open your heart, allow yourself to be tender. That is the charisma, fear. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds really good. I want to open my heart. I want to feel loved. I want to accept that I am valued and loved, but I've been hurt, and I've been hurt by spirituality, and I've been hurt by religion, and I've been hurt by the practice of faith, because falling in love and kissing the divine, has often turned into this soul cage. That's something that needs to be healed. That soul cage exists around the stories that would encage a soul. And there are experiences that we've had. If you play with magic, there are experiences that you have that can be really horrifying too. So it's not just the stories that we can sort of bump up against that can betray us in one way or another, but it's also some of these interactions that we can have with these energies that represent our unexpressed fears collectively, or represent our unprocessed wounds individually. They're always symbolic, they're always representative. We're always entering the archetypal field of a deity, either at the shadow or the light, depending on where we are. And so anything can happen. And so there's this notion of, what if I get swallowed up? What if something possesses me? What if I fall in love with this thing or this community, and then there's some weird belief that I can't ascribe to, and then I'm rejected? What if? Because all of that speaks to this notion of the vulnerability inherent in all spiritual stuff is as intimate as sex is. And so that vulnerability is inherent there with this notion of falling in love. The same way that this notion of falling in love with deity worship, falling in love with a god, falling in love with a goddess, falling in love with this notion of this connection and this covenant with the ancients that are around you, that are working with and through and for you. All of that has this risk of, what if it goes wrong? What if it gets scary? What if I don't have help? What if I'm praying and doing all of this devotion and putting all of this time into this practice, and then at the moment of my most need, I just wasted all of my time and I should have just been practical? Because if I was not praying that entire time, maybe I would have been going to nursing school, right? I'm throwing, your guys are basically saying this is kind of a big deal, because this is going to be one of the scariest soul cage trap. Where's your energy being siphoned? Where is your energy being put to use? Where are you doing something for yourself? Where are you doing something for somebody else? Where are you walking a program? Where are you being programmed? We have this terrorizing reality, these terrorizing energies that are eliciting as much fear as humanly possible, especially around this individualistic, are you good enough? Are you not good enough? Did you do it right? Did you do it wrong? Did you make the right or wrong decisions about the way that you spent your time? Meanwhile, spirituality is out here going, come fall in love with me. Just be. Just be. You're enough. You're the eternal child. You're worthy and deserving of love just as you are. Where we agree, where we place that collective agreement is where that power ends up being. And sometimes what it means to remove this rock from the root system is to confront moving away from one soul cage, but then being afraid of like what it means to sort of what if you put your roots in and it's not a rock, but it's something else that's poisonous. Like, where is it safe to be with this intimate vulnerability that is spirituality? And with this adrift that says letting go, allowing a higher force to take charge for a time. You know, everything about what it means to sort of begin to use this technology and to begin to foster this safety is about having a concept of the divine that is for you and not against you. And for trusting that the divine is for you and not against you. And to understanding that when you're falling in love with the divine, if you find yourself in some sort of challenge that feels like a cage that necessitates you to extract yourself and move in a new direction, that isn't a lack of protection, that is protection like operating as it should, that's where it comes into this notion of you're doing this sorting, and you're sorting, that's the shadow aspect of the archetype that I was attracted to. And I want to move into the light attribute of what it means to interact with what this is. Moving away from war and into advocacy, doing that sorting, moving away from frivolous, like popcorn lust, and moving into intimacy and love, moving away from the counterfeit and into the real by way of experience and sorting. That's not a cage for your soul. That's a process. And sometimes it can be so damn hard. There's no two ways about it. You know, sometimes it can be really scary, but this coagulation, you know, this process of falling in love with the divine, having ideas about what the divine is, bumping into the reality of what the divine is not, feeling like you're encaged now, having to encounter this wound of abandonment, and in that wound of abandonment there's all sorts of pieces and shards of glass and broken bits and things that need to be pulled out, looked at, and done away with. But if we keep on picking at the wound, that I can't trust the divine, because every single time I try to get near the divine, I feel the presence of the pieces of this wound poking at me and making themselves known to be pulled out. And therefore, there's just no safe way to do this. Instead of just sometimes what it means to be in a falling in love is that falling in love happens like this. You fall in love, and then you have to move out a little bit to sort of experience yourself and move back in again. Falling in love is not a parallel experience. It's an out and in and out and in and out and in, an expansion and a contraction. And same with the divine. And so within that moving in love with the divine, there's still this moment of tension that says, but what this is and what this isn't, and what it means to sort, and what it means to encounter the pieces of that have to be removed from the wound, and then allow that wound to actually become sort of like, there's a phase of just allowing it to coagulate. You know, there's a lot that goes into the action of interaction. Yeah, like the way that the speeches go. It's funny because working with harmonies, like I can hear myself, and occasionally there's such a ring to the language. It's like action, reaction. But yeah, this notion of vulnerability and adrift, and what does it mean to trust, and the soul cage is again like looking at these relationships like not punishment and rewards, not perfect and imperfect, some sort of where we are, you know, in terms of this ecosystem, is going to be a way of finding how to fall in love and safely experience the moving in and then the moving out. And this relationship to this soul cage, I just want to get a couple cards on that. And just see what I see here. And then we'll start soul cage. What do we have here? Show me what the soul cage is. Innocence. So the soul cage a lot of time will be the dream and the expectation. Every single time you fall in love with someone that you don't know intimately, that you're not like in the day-to-day experience of like their dirty dishes and the, you know, the way that they snore or whatever it is. You know, anytime you're like just in love with somebody who you don't really know that well, this aspect of the dream here sort of speaks to like you're in love with the archetype. You're in love with the archetype. You're in love with the story about that person that you have, given what you see based on your archetypal knowledge. You're always in love with an archetype, meaning you're always in love with some form of the divine, some form of the divine that they represent, that they're bringing through, that is of archetypal God-like substance, right? And so you're always in love with something that is aspirational in one way or another. But then the experience of love is not. So it's like falling in love is like always this aspirational aspect, but the experience of love is very different from an aspirational kind of thing. With this innocence, this slowing down, and this going with the flow, there is a way in which, you know, as you begin to think about like putting your roots down in places where you could have that nutrients and like where is the divine aspect of God or goddess that I can fall in love with and safely be in love with without finding myself in some sort of like soul cage where I need rescue and escape from captivity and restriction. Like how do I have a belief that supports me? How do I have this love without the rules being right or wrong? Or how, you know, this notion of the innocence that you come into this with, like the innocence of play and openness and your heart wide open, but there's often a cause to slow down. And so the soul cage, you know, the things that sort of show up to warn you away or show up to kind of, you know, temper your approach or even just like have you like lean back a little bit and reassess, like all of that is about your sorting process. And so you're kind of invited into this notion that like when you're attracted to something, it's an archetype kind of calling you. It's the call, you know, in one way or another. But then when you're actually experiencing the relationship, there's always cause for slowing down. There's always cause for sort of evaluating. And there's always cause for a different experience once you're actually in relationship as opposed to aspiring towards something. And so even with the divine, you're going to have this experience of aspiring toward this is the relationship that it is with the, to have a goddess and God, this is what it feels like, this is what it operates like, this is what it is. It's aspirational. The actual experience is going to be one where you're going to have to slow down and figure out what's actually happening here. What am I interacting with? What does that really mean? How do I want to feel? How does it make me feel? Why is it making me feel this way? How do I get it to make me feel that way? Is this this? Is this that? That's working it out. And that's not the absence of the divine. That's very much the presence of the divine. And so like this going with the flow, which is a very similar card to this adrift card. The adrift card is letting go, allowing a higher force to take charge for a time and going with the flow. That belief that you, if you're able to step into that belief that says, I am loved, I am actually adored by the divine. I am nurtured. I am with a benevolent guide that adores me like a mother is supposed to adore their child. Like a parent is supposed to adore their child. That belief is permission then to lay back and to be able to lift up and to be in that place of letting go, allowing a higher force to take charge for a time. That belief puts you in flow. And so when you can sort of be able to put it together as this is the belief that puts me in flow and that allows me to be here in whatever moment I'm having with love, with the presence of love, with the presence of support, with the presence of that which is inspiring me to see this thing or experience this thing or feel this thing that feels good, that feels nourishing. That is your roots in the nourishing place. And so that belief produces this position, and this position produces the alchemy for receiving, for nourishing you, and then it's with that nourishment that you go out and overcome those obstacles. And the inspiration that the guides and the ancients are with you to help you do so. And so, you know, we're going to leave that here because this vulnerability, again, exists in the way of this fear. But we're being called into really fostering the safe space within. And so with that, we're going to close. I want to get just like a couple of words. I like these sentence cards. Get a couple of words from our guides and a little bit of water. And And I think this next part, in terms of like, what do we have here in the way of a community standard from this reading? I think it's more about being able to grapple with this concept of shared beliefs and how certain shared beliefs foster like an outcome with the technology of faith that, if we are able to set healthy boundaries, and let go of some of the harm that the past is capable of keeping with us, that's like there's something there too. And also in terms of like what it means to interact with people who are still holding to dangerous beliefs or difficult beliefs, like that's going to be a whole inquiry that we have to go into. And so setting healthy boundaries is an important part of this soul, like for slowing down, feeling like there's innocence and joy and bliss and falling in love, and then slowing down for this process of discovery. Setting these healthy boundaries, letting go of things that are harmful and holding to things that are, and this whole notion of what it means to step into this flow and this vulnerability and this adrift. Again, it goes with this notion of a belief that says that you can, that it's safe to. And then, of course, we're going to always ask the question, what if that belief isn't 100% true? Well, it depends on the definition of safe. And I think we're going to work on what that means. Because the abundant universe will provide and be at peace. With the bottom of the deck means slow and steady wins the race. So, back to this notion of there's a lot of indoctrination. There's a lot that we're kind of up against. There's a lot that we have to look at in the way of boundaries also produce a safe way to sort of let go into this space of spiritual reverie. So maybe it's not, maybe we're just going to kind of leave this as a part one. I think there's actually more to explore here in terms of like what it means to slow down. I think that there's a lot that we have to look at in terms of like with a belief that says I am worthy and deserving of love and acceptance just as I am, we can definitely ascribe to that. But with a belief that says the divine loves me and takes care of me and is with me and is for me, there does need to be a slowing down and evaluating, thinking about the boundaries that might be involved in a process of feeling safe for this type of innocence and intimacy. And then in that place of sorting, which again, we do it slowly, you know what I mean? Like there isn't some kind of huge rush. Slow and steady wins the race in terms of finding this place of peace, accessing this place of peace, and keeping that internal peace without bypassing any of the stuff. And so time to let go does speak to like a sorting process. And what are we letting go of? And what are we stepping into receiving with the abundant universe will provide and be at peace? The abundant universe will provide, it actually speaks to we are loved and cared for. There is provision. But looking at the provision, we might find it falls short. But there is provision. And so be at peace speaks to this notion of, this is kind of the whole reading, and I do actually think we're going to come back again at a certain point and I'm going to make a note for us to sort of look at like, this whole slowing down and like working out this relationship. I guess that my guides, your guides too, are like, that's what we do all the time. That's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing here. And that's kind of like what community is like our guides are saying, like, one of the reasons like why we do this in community, why we don't just do this all by ourselves, is because in community, this slow and steady, this testing it out, this feeling it out, this being supportive of each other, this allowing for us to all sort of have a communal experience of some shared belief around what it means to figure out and participate in a notion that you are loved by the divine. That's the work of it. But it's a lot easier to do that together. And so in terms of setting the healthy boundaries, a lot of what needs to happen with the healthy boundaries that need to be set in order to facilitate this process is like settling on some of like what the value of the technology is. The value of the technology of the peace that a shared belief and then a personal belief that God is for you can bring and does bring, and why people actually people sign up for horrible dogma for that technology to work, and to sort of for the abundant universe to provide, to believe the abundant universe provides, is first sort of letting go of some of the things that keep us from this effective technology, keep us from this effective relationship with the divine. and keep us from this effective relationship with each other. And then setting those healthy boundaries so that there's a way to let go and allow a higher force to take charge and go with the flow and enter into that state that does provide, like, it provides that confidence, it provides that catharsis, and that's what we're kind of looking for. And so there's this notion of like dealing with this anxiety about where we are right now and what it means to defend ourselves and what it means to kind of even be around spiritual principles or spiritual belief systems. Like, this is kind of the work. So this is where we're going to leave it today. Our guides are like, there's a lot that is ahead of us that is work. But what they want to say about the work that they're putting before us is that it's gentle. Consider what it means to be loved by the divine, to be supported by the divine, to know that you're embraced by the divine. Consider what that belief does for you, what that belief is when you really spend time with it, and what even your confrontation is with that kind of a belief, or what is your opposition with that sort of belief. Begin to engage with these things so that we can come together and really talk about them, and we will. And so with that, let's leave it. Sending you all so much love, so much peace. And there's a lot going on right now. If you find yourself scared, don't hesitate to say so, because I find myself scared looking at this stuff. And I just think it's good to know that part of what it means to participate together in this space is also have a space where we can sort of communally be like, oh my gosh, what's going on? You know what I mean? Like, or look at this is really scary. And so I encourage us to begin to have those sort of open conversations so that we can begin to sort of establish a little bit of what it means to be in a space where we speak freely and feel that it's safe, and have that speech be like in and of itself a place of holding space, and like putting a flag down and saying this is part of what we are about, is speaking in this way safely with each other. And to the extent that any of that gets interrupted, like, we can begin to, again, we're going to talk about this stuff. I'm going to really participate in kind of figuring out how to make it so that this is a place where we can come and bring our grievances and do have certain beliefs that we sort of agree on in terms of what it means to care about each other. So bringing that safe space in within ourselves, a lot of that has to do with allowing for there to be a higher power that we really do believe is for us. Because yes, there's a lot that's hidden from us. But ultimately, there's also a lot of revelation that has come through to bring the kind of transformation that is really sort of beautiful and amazing. And I keep on going on and on, even though we've already stopped. So I'm going to leave it there. All right, sending you all so much love.